Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in again. Tonight we're jumping into some unsettling true horror stories that'll make you think twice about everyday encounters. So get comfortable, or maybe not too comfortable, and let's get started.
So, I recently had a pretty horrifying experience that I feel compelled to share. A few months ago, I went out with some friends to celebrate a birthday at a local bar. I was feeling confident and a bit adventurous, and after a few drinks, I met a guy named Jake. He was charming, funny, and had this magnetic energy that drew me in. We hit it off instantly and ended up leaving the bar together. After a night of drinks and dancing, we went back to his place. It was a small, messy apartment, but I didn't mind. We had a great time and things got pretty steamy. Eventually, we fell asleep, wrapped up in each other. I woke up a few hours later to find Jake missing from the bed. I thought it was strange, but figured he was just in the bathroom or something. I lay there for a while, feeling a bit uneasy, but I eventually drifted back to sleep. When I woke up again, it was still dark, but I could hear faint noises coming from outside the bedroom. I crept out of bed, trying not to make any noise, and walked towards the sound. It led me to the living room, where I saw Jake sitting on the couch, staring intently at his phone. He looked up as I approached, and his expression sent chills down my spine. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he just kept staring at the screen. I finally peeked over his shoulder to see what he was looking at, and my heart dropped. It was a video feed from a hidden camera, his own setup, pointed directly at the bed where we had just been sleeping. "What the hell is this?" I shouted, feeling my stomach churn. He finally turned to me, a sick grin on his face. "Just something I like to do for fun," he said nonchalantly. I felt sick and violated. I didn't stick around to hear anything else. I bolted back to the bedroom, grabbed my clothes, and hurriedly got dressed. "Wait, you can't leave!" he yelled as I rushed for the front door. I didn't look back. I ran to my car, frantically searching for my keys as I fought back tears. I couldn't believe I had put myself in such a dangerous situation. I drove home shaking, completely horrified. I never went back to that bar again, and I made sure to be more cautious in the future. The thought of what could have happened if I hadn't woken up makes my skin crawl. It's a reminder that not everyone has good intentions, and sometimes, one night can lead to terrifying consequences. Okay, so this happened a while ago, but it's a story that still haunts me. I met a guy named Ryan on Tinder. He seemed great on paper, funny, cute, and we had a lot in common. After a week of chatting, we decided to meet up for drinks. I was excited, and everything seemed to go perfectly. We laughed, shared stories, and I felt a genuine connection. After a few hours, we went back to his place, which was a cozy little apartment not too far from the bar. We got comfortable, and things escalated quickly. It was all fun and games, until I noticed a peculiar smell in the room. It wasn't overwhelming, but it was definitely there, like something had gone rancid. I tried to ignore it, but it started to get to me. In the midst of everything, I decided to excuse myself to the bathroom. I wanted to splash some water on my face and try to shake off that weird feeling. As I walked down the hallway, I saw some strange items strewn about, a pair of handcuffs hanging on a doorknob and a massive knife on the kitchen counter. My heart started racing as I tried to convince myself that maybe he just had a quirky taste in decor. When I got to the bathroom, I took a minute to calm down. I splashed water on my face and took a deep breath. But when I opened the bathroom cabinet to find a towel, my stomach dropped. Inside were dozens of prescription bottles. Some of them were antidepressants and others for anxiety. That's when I heard Ryan calling from the other room. "Hey, you okay in there?" I knew I had to get out. I didn't want to panic, but the combination of the smell, the handcuffs, and the pills was too much. I quickly washed my hands, but as I turned to leave, I saw something moving in the corner of the bathroom. It was a little trapdoor, slightly ajar. My mind raced as I imagined what could be hiding beneath it. I opened the door and peered inside. It was dark, and I couldn't see much, but I could hear faint noises. I backed away, heart pounding. I decided to slip back into the living room as casually as possible, trying to think of an excuse to leave. "Hey, let's just go to your place," I suggested, hoping he wouldn't catch on. He looked at me, confused, but agreed. As we walked out, I felt a rush of relief. We made it to my car, and I breathed a sigh of relief as I drove away. I never spoke to Ryan again. I learned my lesson: trust your instincts. That night could have ended very differently, and I still wonder what was lurking in that trapdoor. I had just moved to a new city for work, and like most people, I decided to explore the dating scene. I matched with a guy named Kevin on a dating app, and he seemed really sweet. After a few days of chatting, we arranged to meet up for dinner. The date went really well, and I felt an instant chemistry. Afterward, we went back to my place. Things started to heat up, and just when it seemed like the night would end perfectly, he suddenly pulled away. "I need to tell you something," he said, looking serious. My heart dropped a little, thinking he was about to confess something embarrassing. Instead, he said, "I have a condition." "What kind of condition?" I asked, a little taken aback. He explained that he had a severe fear of intimacy and struggled with anxiety. I could see the nervousness in his eyes, and I felt a pang of sympathy. He seemed genuine, so I assured him it was okay and that we could take things slow. But as the night went on, he became increasingly agitated. He paced around my living room, running his hands through his hair, clearly battling some internal conflict. I offered to help him relax, but he just shook his head, mumbling about needing to leave. Before I could process what was happening, he suddenly grabbed my arm and said, "You have to promise me you won't freak out." I felt a surge of fear at the tone of his voice. "What are you talking about?" I stammered. That's when he pulled out a knife from his pocket. "I'm not going to hurt you, but I need you to understand how serious I am about my fear. I need to feel in control." My mind raced. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need you to let me tie you up," he said, his eyes wide with a mix of desperation and excitement. I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. "Are you serious? This isn't what I signed up for," I said, backing away slowly. He stepped closer, and I realized he wasn't joking. Panic surged through me, and I shouted, "Get out!" He froze, surprised, and for a moment, I thought he might lash out. But then, he dropped the knife and backed away, muttering apologies. "I'm sorry, I just thought..." I ushered him out, locking the door behind him as soon as he left. My heart was racing. I couldn't believe I had put myself in such a terrifying situation. I learned to trust my instincts that night, and never let a good first impression blind me to the red flags again. So, this happened about a year ago, and I still get anxious just thinking about it. I had a one-night stand with a girl named Tara after meeting at a friend's party. She was beautiful, fun, and we instantly clicked. After a few drinks, we ended up at my place, where we had a passionate night together. Everything seemed perfect until the next morning when I woke up alone. I figured Tara had left for whatever reason, so I didn't think much of it. I got out of bed and made some coffee, still feeling a bit groggy. Just as I was about to sit down, there was a loud knock on my door. I opened it, and to my shock, it was Tara's older brother, a guy I recognized from social media but had never met. He looked furious. "Where is she?" he demanded, pushing past me into my apartment. I was stunned. "What are you talking about?" "Don't act stupid. I know she was here last night." I felt my stomach drop. I tried to explain that we had just met and that I hadn't seen her since the night before. He didn't believe me. His eyes narrowed, and he looked like he was about to explode. "She's been gone all night, and you think it's funny?" Before I could respond, He grabbed my shirt, pushing me back against the wall. "If you've done anything to her, I swear." My heart raced as I tried to reason with him, explaining that I had no idea where she was and that I wouldn't hurt her. I was terrified of how quickly things escalated. After a few tense moments, he released me, still looking like he was about to lose it. Just then, my phone buzzed on the table. I quickly grabbed it, seeing a text from Tara. "Hey, sorry, I stayed at a friend's place last night. I'll call you later." I showed the text to her brother, who read it with narrowed eyes. Finally, he backed away, mumbling something under his breath before storming out of my apartment. I locked the door behind him, shaking. I learned a valuable lesson that night about the potential consequences of one-night stands. I still have no idea what happened to Tara, or why her brother reacted the way he did, but it was a stark reminder that you never know who you might be dealing with when it comes to casual encounters. So this happened a few months ago, and it still makes my skin crawl. I had just moved to a new city and was trying to get settled. One weekend, I went out with some friends, and I ended up meeting a girl named Mia at a bar. We hit it off immediately, and after a few drinks, we decided to head back to my place. At first, everything was great. We laughed, talked, and things heated up quickly. We ended up in bed together, and it felt like a perfect night. I fell asleep with her in my arms, but I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of my front door creaking open. I froze, heart racing, unsure if I was dreaming. I turned to see Mia still asleep next to me, but the door was definitely open. I slid out of bed quietly and tiptoed to the living room. That's when I saw him. A man was standing in my living room, dressed in a black hoodie, rifling through my things. I whispered, "Hey, who are you?" The man turned, and I could see the shock on his face. He quickly bolted for the door. I yelled for him to stop, but he was already gone. My heart was pounding, and I quickly locked the door behind him. I felt a mix of adrenaline and dread. I returned to the bedroom and Mia was still asleep. I gently shook her awake. "Mia, wake up. Someone just broke in." She shot up, wide-eyed, and I could see the fear settling in. I explained what happened, and we both stayed quiet, listening for any signs of the intruder returning. After a few tense moments, I decided to call the police. When they arrived, they did a quick search of my apartment but found no signs of the intruder. They took my statement and told me to be careful. After they left, Mia suggested I stay at her place for the night. I hesitated, still shaken from the break-in, but I agreed. As we got dressed, I suddenly realized something. "Wait, do you live alone?" She looked at me confused. "Yeah, why? Is that why you were so comfortable coming over?" I asked, my voice shaking a little. "Yeah, why?" she repeated, but then her expression changed. "You're not thinking..." I felt a cold rush of dread. I had never asked her about her living situation. What if that guy was connected to her? What if this was all a setup? I couldn't shake the feeling, and I decided to call a friend to come pick me up. Mia looked disappointed, but understood when I explained. As I left, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something truly terrifying. This is a story about a one-night stand that turned into an absolute nightmare. A few months back, I went out to a club with some friends, and I met this guy named Tom. He was charming, and we instantly clicked. After a few drinks, we decided to go back to his place. His apartment was in an old building with creaky floorboards and dim lighting. I thought it had a certain charm. Once inside, we got cozy, and things escalated quickly. After some passionate moments, we ended up in bed. It was a good night, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. In the middle of the night, I woke up to the sound of Tom whispering to someone. I opened my eyes to see him sitting up in bed, his phone in hand, looking tense. "Who are you talking to?" I mumbled, groggy from sleep. "Just my friend," he replied. But the way he said it made me uneasy. I tried to go back to sleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to get out of there. I quietly got up and went to the bathroom. As I washed my hands, I noticed a door at the end of the hallway slightly ajar. Curiosity got the best of me, and I walked over to it. When I opened the door, I was hit with a musty smell. Inside was a small dark room, filled with old furniture and random boxes. I turned on the light, and my stomach dropped. There were stacks of old photographs, all of different women, and they all looked like they had been taken without their consent. Some of them were obviously intimate, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. Just then, I heard footsteps coming down the hall, and my heart raced. I quickly closed the door and rushed back to the bathroom, trying to act casual when Tom walked in. "Hey, you okay?" he asked, looking a bit too casual for my liking. "Yeah, just needed to use the bathroom," I said, forcing a smile. I knew I had to get out. I grabbed my clothes and got dressed as quickly as I could without alarming him. When he turned away to grab something, I slipped out of the bedroom and headed for the front door. Just as I reached the exit, I heard him call out, "Hey, where are you going?" I didn't look back. I threw open the door and ran down the hall. I could hear him shouting behind me, but I didn't stop until I reached my car. I drove away, shaking and terrified. I never spoke to him again, and later found out that several women had reported him for similar behaviors. I felt lucky to have escaped with only a scary story to tell. I've had my fair share of one-night stands, but this one still haunts me. A while ago, I met a girl named Sarah at a bar. We were both feeling the vibe, and ended up back at my place after a few drinks. The chemistry was electric, and we had an amazing time. After we fell asleep, I was woken up in the early morning by a loud banging on my front door. I groggily looked at the clock. It was only 3 a.m. I could hear muffled voices, and I felt a rush of anxiety. I gently shook Sarah awake. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. She nodded, looking worried. "Maybe it's just someone at the wrong apartment," she suggested. I got out of bed and tiptoed to the door, peeking through the peephole. What I saw made my heart drop. There were 2 burly guys standing outside, and they looked angry. One of them was yelling, "Open up! We know you're in there!" I stepped back, my mind racing. "We need to hide," I said, my voice shaky. I grabbed Sarah's hand and led her to the bedroom. We quickly crawled under the bed, hearts pounding. I could hear the guys outside still banging on the door, demanding to be let in. Suddenly I heard the door break open and my breath caught in my throat. They stormed in, their voices booming through my apartment. "Where is she?" one of them shouted. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't find us. I heard them rummaging through my things, knocking over furniture. They sounded furious, and I could only imagine what they would do if they discovered us. After what felt like an eternity, they finally left, slamming the door behind them. I crawled out from under the bed, shaking. "What the hell was that?" Sarah asked, looking terrified. "I don't know," I admitted, my heart still racing. "But we need to get out of here." We quickly gathered our things and slipped out of the apartment, avoiding any noise. Once we got to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. As we drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw those same guys standing outside my apartment, looking around. I later found out that they were looking for Sarah. Apparently, she had some sort of trouble with them, but she never told me the details. It still makes my skin crawl to think about what could have happened if we hadn't hidden in time. This story is about the worst one-night stand I've ever experienced. It started like a typical night out with friends at a local diner. We were all laughing and having a good time when I noticed a guy sitting alone at the counter. He kept glancing over at me, and I could feel his eyes on me. I shrugged it off, thinking he was just some lonely guy. As the night went on, he finally approached me. His name was Eric, and he was charming in a way that drew me in. We chatted for a while, and before long, we were laughing and flirting. My friends left, and Eric suggested we continue the night at his place. I was feeling adventurous and agreed. Once we arrived at his apartment, we had a few drinks and started kissing. Things progressed quickly, and we ended up in the bedroom. But right as things were getting heated, I noticed something odd. Eric kept glancing at his phone and receiving messages. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He smiled and waved it off. "Yeah, just some buddies checking in." I tried to ignore it and focus on the moment, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Just as we started to get into it, his phone buzzed again. This time he looked more agitated. "Hold on a second," he said, getting up and walking out of the room. I lay there, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but he sounded angry. A knot formed in my stomach as I wondered what was happening. After several minutes, he returned, and his demeanor had changed. He seemed agitated and distant. "Sorry about that," he said, trying to act nonchalant, but I could tell something was wrong. I decided it was time to go. "Hey, I think I should head home," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked frustrated. "What? We were just getting started." I quickly gathered my things and headed for the door, but as I reached the entrance, I heard a loud knock at the door. My heart dropped. Eric's face turned pale, and he whispered, "Stay quiet." I pressed myself against the wall, feeling panic rise within me. The knocking grew louder, and I could hear voices on the other side. "Eric, we know you're in there. Open up." My heart raced as I realized this was not just a casual visit. I glanced at Eric, who looked terrified. "What did you get into?" I whispered. He shook his head, looking frantic. Just stay quiet. They'll go away." I didn't want to stick around to find out what would happen if they got in. As quietly as I could, I crept toward the back window and pushed it open. I squeezed through and climbed down, my heart pounding. Once I hit the ground, I took off running down the street, not looking back. I didn't stop until I reached my car, shaking with fear. I drove home feeling lucky to have escaped whatever situation I had stumbled into. That night taught me that sometimes you need to trust your instincts, especially when it comes to strangers. So, I was in college and living in a pretty small apartment with 2 roommates. One night we went to a party, and I ended up meeting this guy named Mark. He was charming and funny, and after a few drinks, we decided to head back to our place. Things heated up pretty quickly, and before I knew it, we were tangled up in bed. I was feeling confident and carefree until I heard a loud bang coming from the living room. It startled me awake, and I felt my heart drop. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, shaking Mark. He grunted but didn't wake up. I was still buzzing from the drinks, but my instincts kicked in, and I knew I had to check it out. I slipped out of bed and walked toward the sound. As I reached the living room, I could see our front door had been left ajar. I looked outside but saw nothing. Just as I was about to head back, I heard a voice behind me. "What are you doing?" I turned to see my roommate, Sarah, standing there with a look of panic on her face. "You need to get out of here," she said urgently. "Why?" I asked, confused. "I just saw a guy lurking outside the window. I think he's been watching you two." My stomach dropped. I quickly looked back at Mark, still fast asleep. "What do you mean? Did you see him?" "Yes. I thought I was imagining it, but I swear I saw someone peeking in at you." Fear flooded my body. I couldn't believe I had brought this guy home without knowing anything about him. I felt a wave of nausea. "Mark, wake up!" I yelled, shaking him. He finally opened his eyes, looking groggy. "What's going on?" "Get dressed, we need to leave." He blinked in confusion, but I didn't have time to explain. Sarah quickly helped me get Mark dressed, and we all scrambled to grab our things. As we rushed out of the apartment, I glanced back and saw a shadow move in the hallway. My heart raced, and I ran down the stairs with my roommate and Mark behind me. We made it outside just as a figure appeared at the door. I turned to look back, and the guy was staring at us with a wild expression. I had never been so terrified in my life. We called the police, who arrived minutes later, but the guy was gone. That was the last time I ever invited a guy home from a party. Lesson learned. I was going through a rough patch after a breakup, so I decided to try my luck with online dating. One night, I matched with a guy named Ryan, and we hit it off instantly. After chatting for a while, he invited me over to his place. I felt a little hesitant, but he seemed genuinely nice, and I thought, why not? When I arrived, his apartment was cozy and welcoming. We had a few drinks, and the conversation flowed easily. Things escalated, and soon we were in bed. It felt like a perfect night, until I noticed something strange. In the corner of the room, there was a door that looked like it led to a closet, but it was locked. I tried to shake off my curiosity and focus on the moment, but I couldn't help glancing at it every now and then. Around 2 a.m., I heard a faint scratching noise coming from behind that door. I paused, my heart racing. I turned to Ryan, who was fast asleep. The noise grew louder, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I decided to investigate. I quietly slipped out of bed and approached the door. I pressed my ear against it, and the scratching stopped. It was then that I noticed a faint sound of muffled voices coming from the other side. My stomach dropped. Feeling bold, I jiggled the handle. To my surprise, it was unlocked. I opened it just a crack and peered inside. What I saw made my blood run cold. There were clothes scattered everywhere, and it looked like someone had been living there. On the wall, there were photos of different women, each with a date written underneath. My heart raced as I realized they were all dated within the last few weeks. Just then, I heard a loud noise behind me. I spun around, and Ryan was standing in the doorway, eyes wide with shock. "What are you doing?" Panic surged through me. "Who are these women?" I shouted. His expression shifted from confusion to anger. "You weren't supposed to see that." I backed away, realizing I had walked into a twisted situation. "I need to leave," I said, trying to push past him, but he blocked the way. "Calm down, it's not what you think," he snapped. "Then let me out." He stepped aside, and I bolted out of the apartment, not looking back. I ran to my car, shaking with fear. I never spoke to him again, and it took me a long time to trust anyone after that night. This one-night stand story is definitely one for the books. I met a guy named Alex at a local bar, and after chatting for a few hours, we decided to head back to his place. He was charming, and the chemistry was undeniable, so I was all in. Once we got to his apartment, things took a different turn. He had a really nice setup, but I noticed something strange right away. It was eerily quiet. No music, no TV, nothing. I mentioned it, and he just smiled and said he preferred it that way. I shrugged it off, thinking he might just be a minimalist. We settled in, had a drink, and started getting comfortable. But the silence felt oppressive. As we were getting cozy on the couch, I noticed Alex had this odd collection of trophies lining the shelves. They looked old and dusty, and I couldn't help but ask him about them. "Oh, those are from my high school days," he replied nonchalantly. I was pretty competitive. As the night went on, I tried to lighten the mood by making jokes, but he didn't seem to respond. It was like he was lost in thought. I felt a growing unease, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. After some awkward moments, we ended up heading to the bedroom. Just as things were heating up, I heard a soft rustling sound coming from a corner of the room. I glanced over and saw something move. My heart raced. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice shaking. He looked confused. "Hear what?" I got up and walked towards the sound. As I approached, I noticed a large covered object in the corner. My curiosity piqued, and I lifted the cover, revealing a large wooden trunk. My heart sank as I saw the chains and locks around it. "What is this?" I asked, my voice trembling. Suddenly, Alex's demeanor changed. "You shouldn't have opened that," he shouted, his voice low and menacing. My instincts kicked in, and I backed away slowly, heart pounding. "I think I need to go." He stepped closer, blocking my path. "You're not leaving until you understand." I pushed past him and bolted for the door, adrenaline pumping through my veins. As I reached for the doorknob, I heard him shout, You'll regret this! I flung the door open and ran down the hall, not stopping until I reached my car. I sped away, shaking from the experience. I later found out he had a reputation for being controlling and strange. I'm just grateful I got out in time. I'm not proud of it, but I ended up having a one-night stand with a guy I met at a bar after a particularly rough breakup. His name was Derek, and he was charming enough. We hit it off quickly and ended up back at my place. The chemistry was intense, and I was grateful for a distraction. Things went smoothly until we got to the bedroom. As we started to get intimate, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I ignored it at first, but then I glanced over and saw it was a text from an unknown number. I shrugged it off, thinking it was probably just a spam message. After we had our fun, Derek fell asleep almost immediately, and I lay there wide awake, feeling a little anxious about the whole situation. Suddenly, my phone buzzed again. I picked it up to check the message. My heart dropped when I read it. "I know where you are. Get out now." I felt a chill run down my spine. Who was this? I looked over at Derek, who was still fast asleep. I felt a mix of fear and anger. Maybe it was just a prank, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I decided to ignore it and put my phone down, but then I heard the unmistakable sound of my front door creaking open. My blood ran cold. I tiptoed out of the bedroom and peeked around the corner. My heart raced as I saw a figure entering my apartment, an unfamiliar man wearing a hoodie. "Hello," I called out, trying to sound braver than I felt. The figure froze and turned toward me, and that's when I saw his face. It was Derek's ex, a girl named Melissa, who I'd heard about but never met. "What are you doing here?" I stammered, backing away. "You shouldn't have slept with him," she said, her voice low and filled with anger. Before I could respond, she lunged at me. I barely managed to dodge her and ran back into the bedroom, waking Derek. "Get up. We need to go." Derek bolted upright, confusion written all over his face. "What's happening?" "Your ex is here," I shouted. Melissa burst into the room just as I grabbed my phone. I dialed 911 as she screamed at Derek, accusing him of betraying her. I was terrified and felt like I was caught in the middle of something much bigger than a one-night stand. By the time the police arrived, Melissa was gone, but the damage was done. I was shaken, and I didn't see Derek again after that night. Lesson learned. One-night stands can sometimes lead to more trouble than they're worth. It was one of those nights when I decided to let loose and have some fun. After a few drinks at a club, I met this guy named Kyle. He was charming, funny, and we clicked instantly. By the end of the night, we were at his place, and I was feeling excited about the new adventure. His apartment was well kept, and the atmosphere was comfortable. We started off with a few more drinks, and things quickly escalated. Just as we were getting intimate, I noticed something strange, a tiny red light flashing from the corner of the room. I glanced over, and my stomach sank. "Hey, what's that light?" I asked, pointing toward it. "Oh, that's just my alarm," he replied casually, shrugging it off. I wasn't convinced. It felt too intentional, too invasive. "Are you sure it's not a camera?" I pressed. Kyle laughed it off. "Don't be silly, it's just an alarm." Still uneasy, I decided to push through. After all, it was too late to back out. But after we were done, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I got dressed and headed to the bathroom. As I stood in front of the mirror, my instincts kicked in. I decided to take a closer look around the room. I casually walked over to the corner with the light, and sure enough, I spotted a small camera hidden among the books on the shelf. My heart raced. Just then, I heard Kyle call out, "Hey, where are you?" I quickly turned off the camera and hid it behind a stack of books. "Just freshening up," I shouted back, trying to play it cool. I hurried back to the living room, my mind racing. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" I asked, trying to confront him without letting my fear show. "What are you talking about?" he said, but I could see the smirk on his face. Is that a camera? I accused him, my voice shaky. He paused for a moment before answering. I was just being cautious, you know. People can be weird. Feeling trapped, I bolted for the door. You're a creep, I yelled, pushing past him. I rushed out of the apartment and down the stairs, adrenaline pumping through my veins. I never looked back. I felt violated and scared. That night was a harsh reminder that not everyone has good intentions. After a long week, I was ready to let loose. I hit up a bar with some friends and ended up meeting a guy named Matt. He was charming and we quickly hit it off, so we went back to his place. Everything seemed perfect at first. He was fun, attractive, and easy to talk to. As the night went on, I noticed something strange about his apartment. It was decorated well, but it felt eerily empty. No pictures, no personal items, just a few pieces of furniture. I brushed it off, thinking he was just a minimalist. After a while, things heated up, and we ended up in the bedroom. That's when I noticed the closet. It was locked. My curiosity got the better of me, and I asked, "What's in there?" Matt looked a bit uncomfortable, but said, "Just some old stuff. Nothing to worry about." I should have dropped it, but I couldn't. Something felt off. As we got closer, I could hear faint sounds coming from the closet. It sounded like muffled voices. My heart began to race. "Are you sure you're alone here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course," he said, but his eyes shifted uncomfortably. Just then, the noises got louder, almost like someone was banging on the door from inside the closet. Panic surged through me and I jumped out of bed. "What's happening?" Matt sat up, looking terrified. "I don't know! I swear I didn't know!" I was frozen in fear, but something told me I had to get out of there. I grabbed my clothes and rushed toward the door, but it was locked. "Let me out," I shouted. Matt scrambled off the bed and fumbled with the doorknob. "I can't get it open." In that moment, I realized I was in real danger. I pushed past him and slammed my body against the door. With one final shove, it flew open, and I bolted into the living room. As I sprinted toward the exit, I caught a glimpse of the closet door swinging open. I didn't look back. I raced down the stairs and out into the night, my heart pounding. That was the last time I ever went home with someone I didn't know well. Trusting strangers can lead to terrifying situations. I was feeling adventurous one night and decided to try my luck on a dating app. I matched with a guy named Jake, and we hit it off immediately. He suggested we meet at a nearby bar, and I was intrigued. After a couple of drinks, we headed back to my place. I thought he was fun, and we had great chemistry. Everything was going smoothly until I heard a loud knock on the door. It was unexpected, and I felt a little uneasy. "Who could that be?" I asked, looking at Jake. He shrugged, looking just as confused. I peeked through the peephole and saw a delivery guy standing outside, holding a large box. "Do you mind if I get it?" I asked Jake. "Sure, go ahead," he replied casually. I opened the door and the delivery guy smiled, but there was something unsettling about him. "I have a delivery for a Jessica," he said, glancing over my shoulder at Jake. "Yeah, that's me," I replied, taking the package. As I signed for it, I felt Jake move behind me. Suddenly, the delivery guy's smile faded, and he looked directly at Jake. "You're back again?" I turned around, confused. "What do you mean?" Jake's face changed instantly. "What are you talking about?" he asked, sounding defensive. The delivery guy's demeanor shifted, and I could see the tension in the air. "You shouldn't be here, man. Just leave her alone," he said, looking back at me. My heart raced. "What's going on?" I demanded, looking between the two of them. Jake stepped forward, trying to dismiss the delivery guy, but I could feel something was very wrong. The delivery guy looked at me, his expression serious. "He's not who you think he is. You should get away from him." Before I could react, Jake shoved the guy out of the way and slammed the door shut. "Don't listen to him. He's just trying to mess with us." I was in shock, my mind racing. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to grasp the situation. but Jake didn't answer. Instead, he moved closer, his expression intense. I felt a rush of panic. I knew I had to leave. "I need to go," I said, backing away. "Where are you going?" he demanded, stepping forward. I dashed past him and out the door, adrenaline fueling my escape. I ran down the hall, not stopping until I reached my car. I drove away, shaken but grateful for that delivery guy. I never spoke to Jake again. Sometimes it's better to trust your instincts. So, this happened a few years back when I was in my mid-20s. I was out with friends one Friday night at a local bar, just enjoying some drinks and letting loose after a long week. I met this guy named Alex, and we really hit it off. He was charming, funny, and handsome. Definitely my type. After a few drinks, we ended up back at my place. The night started out great. We laughed and shared stories, and the chemistry was undeniable. We ended up in bed, and everything was going smoothly until I noticed something odd about his phone. It was lying on my nightstand, and I could see it lighting up every few minutes. I asked, "Is someone trying to reach you?" He just shrugged it off and said, "Just some friends. Don't worry about it." Around 2 a.m., I started to doze off when his phone buzzed again, followed by a loud ringtone. I was half asleep, but something compelled me to pick it up and check. I don't know why, but I did. The screen flashed with a text from a contact labeled "Wifey." My stomach dropped. Before I could react, Alex stirred and grabbed his phone from me. "What are you doing?" he snapped, his voice cold and defensive. "That's private." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. "You're married?" I stammered, suddenly wide awake. He tried to laugh it off, saying it was a joke, but I wasn't buying it. The vibe in the room changed instantly, and I knew I had to get out. "I'm leaving," I said, scrambling out of bed and grabbing my clothes. "Come on, don't be like that," he pleaded, but I was already pulling on my pants. Just as I reached the door, his phone rang again. I glanced at the screen and saw a picture of a woman and 2 kids smiling happily. My heart sank. I stormed out, slamming the door behind me. I didn't even look back. I felt disgusted with myself for letting it go that far. As I walked to my car, I received a notification. It was a text from an unknown number. "Where are you? You're not supposed to leave." My blood ran cold. I jumped into my car and drove off as fast as I could, shaking with fear. I couldn't believe I had been so naive. After that night, I made a promise to myself to be more careful and to always check for red flags before getting involved with someone new. I'm a single mom in my early 30s, and dating hasn't been easy. One night, I decided to try a dating app and ended up matching with a guy named Ben. He seemed nice enough, and after a few texts, we decided to meet for drinks. Ben was charming and easy to talk to, so by the end of the night, I was feeling a little more adventurous than usual. We ended up back at my place. Things started heating up, and it felt great to finally be desired again. But then, he mentioned something that threw me off. "Yeah, I just got out a few months ago," he said casually. "Out of where?" I asked, my heart sinking. "Prison," he replied as if it were no big deal. I felt a rush of fear. My instincts kicked in, but I was too far in to back out now. He seemed fine, but I couldn't shake the unease. I tried to stay calm, thinking maybe he was just a misunderstood guy trying to turn his life around. After some more drinks, we ended up in my bedroom. But the whole time, I couldn't stop thinking about his past. I asked him what he was in for, and he said, "Just a robbery. Nothing serious." My mind raced. I knew I should have stopped things right then and there, but I didn't want to seem rude. Everything went smoothly until we were lying in bed afterward. Suddenly, I heard a loud crash from the living room. I shot up, my heart racing. What was that? Ben immediately sat up and said, "Stay here." I watched in horror as he grabbed his clothes and headed toward the sound. I was terrified. What if he was a violent criminal? What if he was here to rob me? I couldn't just sit there. So I quietly slipped on my clothes and moved to the back door, ready to escape if necessary. Just as I was about to leave, I heard him yell, "What the hell?" I peeked out and saw him struggling with someone at the door, a man in a ski mask. Panic surged through me, and without thinking, I bolted out the back. I ran to my neighbor's house and pounded on the door until they let me in. I stayed there until the police arrived. They caught Ben and the masked man, who turned out to be his accomplice. I was lucky to escape unharmed, but I realized that not every charming guy is who they seem to be. A while back, I went out with friends to celebrate a promotion at work. After a few drinks, I met this guy named Jason who was tall, dark-haired, and incredibly charming. We ended up having a great time together, and after a few hours, we ended up back at my place. Things started heating up, and we ended up in my bedroom. It was fun and passionate, and for a moment I felt like I was on top of the world. But after we had our fun, he became a little too intense. "Can I see your phone?" he asked, his tone suddenly serious. Why?" I replied, puzzled. "I just want to check something," he insisted. I hesitated but handed it over, thinking maybe he wanted to look up something we were talking about. He took a while scrolling through my photos and texts, and I felt increasingly uncomfortable. "Okay, that's enough," I said, trying to take it back. He laughed it off and kept scrolling, but I could see the gears turning in his mind. Finally, he handed it back but seemed different. "You know, I've always wanted to meet someone like you," he said, staring at me intensely. I started to feel uneasy. "What do you mean by that?" "I mean, I'm a huge fan of your work," he said, leaning closer. "I've followed your social media for a while now." I was taken aback. "Wait, you've been stalking me?" He laughed, but it didn't sound right. "No, not stalking, just admiring from a distance. I think you're amazing." I felt my heart race as I realized he was being serious. This guy knew more about me than I was comfortable with. "I think you should go," I said, my voice shaky. He frowned, looking hurt. "Why? We were having a good time." "Because this isn't right," I snapped, feeling panic rise within me. He finally relented and got dressed, but as he walked to the door, he turned back and said, "You'll regret this. You'll see." I didn't say a word as he left. I locked the door behind him and called a friend, shaking with fear. The next day, I changed all my social media settings and blocked him. I never heard from him again, but I learned that sometimes a charming smile hides a dangerous obsession. After a rough breakup, I decided to hit up a local bar to blow off some steam. There, I met this guy named Kyle, who seemed laid back and easygoing. We had a few drinks, laughed, and eventually went back to his place. Kyle's apartment was cozy, and everything was going well until he brought up his family. "My mom is really involved in my life," he said, shrugging it off. "Yeah, that's cool," I replied, not thinking much of it. As the night went on, we ended up in bed. Everything was great until I heard a loud knock at the door. Kyle looked panicked. "It's probably my mom," he whispered. "Your mom?" I laughed, thinking he was joking. "No, seriously, she's overbearing." Just then, the door burst open, and in walked a woman in her 50s, carrying a plate of cookies. "Surprise," she said cheerfully. I was frozen in shock, half-dressed, with Kyle's eyes wide as saucers. "Mom, what are you doing here?" he stammered, scrambling to cover me with the blanket. "I just wanted to check in on you," she exclaimed, completely unfazed by the awkward situation. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. I think I should go," I said, trying to gather my clothes as fast as I could. "Oh, don't be silly! Stay for cookies!" she insisted, setting the plate down on the bedside table. "No, really, I need to—" "Mom, please," Kyle interrupted, sounding desperate. As I dressed, I could hear her rambling about how she wanted to make sure he was eating right and dating nice girls. I glanced at Kyle, who looked mortified. "I'm so sorry about this," he said, visibly upset. Finally, I managed to pull on my clothes and headed for the door, feeling utterly humiliated. "It was nice meeting you." I forced a smile at his mom before bolting out of the apartment. As I walked to my car, I couldn't help but feel relieved to be away from that weird situation. After that night, I made sure to ask more questions before agreeing to go back to someone's place. Some people just don't know where to draw the line. I had just turned 25 and was trying to embrace the single life after a long-term relationship. One night, I decided to go out with my friends to a popular bar in town. I met this guy named Jake, and we hit it off immediately. He was charming and had that bad boy vibe that I couldn't resist. A few cocktails later, we were back at his place. Things moved quickly, and before I knew it, we were tangled up in his sheets. It felt exhilarating, but as the night went on, I started noticing some strange things. He kept looking at his phone and would disappear for long stretches. I tried not to think too much of it, assuming he was just checking in with friends or something. When we finally fell asleep, I was abruptly awakened in the middle of the night by a loud thud. I sat up, heart racing, and saw Jake standing at the foot of the bed staring at me intently. "What are you doing?" I whispered, startled. "Just making sure you're really here," he replied, his voice flat. I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out his phone and began scrolling through pictures. "Look at these. I just wanted to make sure you weren't like the others." "What others?" I asked, my heart pounding. "The other girls I've been with," he said, looking at me with unsettling intensity. I can't stand being hurt again. Panic set in. I knew I needed to leave. "I think I should go," I stammered, grabbing my clothes. "Why, we were having fun." "Yeah, but this is getting weird," I said, my voice shaking. As I dressed, he moved closer, invading my personal space. "You don't need to go. I can take care of you." His gaze made me feel trapped. I bolted for the door, fumbling with the lock as he shouted after me, "You'll regret this." I ran to my car, feeling a wave of relief as I sped away. It wasn't until I got home that I realized he had taken my number. I didn't hear from him for a few days, but then I started getting strange texts. They were vague and obsessive, mentioning how he couldn't stop thinking about me. I blocked his number and deleted my dating apps, realizing that sometimes a charming smile hides a dangerous obsession. It was a typical Friday night, and I was feeling adventurous after a tough week at work. I met a guy named Mark at a bar downtown, and after a few drinks, we headed back to my place. He seemed nice and fun, and I was ready to let loose. Once we were at my apartment, we hit it off even more. We ended up in bed, and things were great until I heard a loud banging noise. I dismissed it, thinking it was just the neighbors being rowdy. We were lost in our own world, and I was really enjoying myself until I heard the noise again, this time louder. "Did you hear that?" I asked, trying to ignore the creeping anxiety. "Probably just the pipes," Mark said, brushing it off. But then, it happened again. A loud crash followed by muffled voices. I suddenly felt a pit in my stomach. What is going on out there? Mark seemed unfazed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Then, out of nowhere, my apartment door swung open, and my roommate stumbled in, looking panicked. What the hell is going on? My heart dropped. I had forgotten to tell her I was bringing someone home. Mark sat up, looking confused as my roommate's eyes darted between us. Just a little late-night fun," I said awkwardly, trying to lighten the mood. But my roommate wasn't having it. "I heard yelling. Are you okay?" I glanced at Mark, who suddenly looked angry. "What's your problem?" he snapped at her. "I thought someone was in trouble," she shot back, clearly not backing down. Things escalated quickly. Mark jumped out of bed and started shouting at her. "You're ruining the moment. Just get out." I was mortified, feeling trapped between two angry people. I could feel the tension thick in the air, and I knew I had to diffuse it. "Okay, Everyone just calm down. Let's talk about this. Mark wasn't having it. He grabbed his clothes and started to storm out, but not before throwing one last glare at my roommate. You have no idea who you're messing with. Once he left, I turned to my roommate, shaking. I'm so sorry. I didn't know he'd act like that. Let's just make sure you're safe next time, she said, hugging me. I learned that night that even a seemingly fun encounter can take a dark turn, and I promised myself to be more cautious about who I brought home. I was fresh out of a breakup and feeling lonely, so I decided to swipe through a dating app one evening. I matched with a guy named Ryan, and we immediately clicked. We decided to meet at a bar near my place for drinks. He was funny and charming, and before long, we were laughing and sharing stories. After a few drinks, things heated up, and we ended up back at my apartment. I felt a rush of excitement, but as the night progressed, I noticed some red flags. He kept bringing up how much money he made and how many women he'd slept with. It felt a bit off, but I shrugged it off. Everyone has a few odd quirks, right? After a while, we ended up in bed, but the moment turned sour when he started making strange comments about my appearance. You'd look even better with a little more makeup, he said, running his fingers over my face. I felt my stomach twist. I'm fine how I am, I replied, trying to brush it off, but he kept pushing. You could really be something special if you just tried a little harder. I rolled away from him, feeling uneasy. I think I should go to the bathroom. As I got up, I noticed my phone buzzing on the nightstand. I picked it up and saw a series of texts from my friend asking if I was okay. That was when I realized I needed to get out. I quickly grabbed my clothes and headed to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. I texted my friend to come pick me up. Meanwhile, I could hear Ryan in the other room, getting increasingly agitated. Where are you? He yelled. Don't just leave me hanging like this. I felt panic rise in my chest. When I heard him start banging on the bathroom door, I knew I had to act fast. I opened the window and climbed out onto the fire escape. I managed to get down to the street just as my friend pulled up. I jumped into the car, shaking. Ryan came to the window looking furious, but I didn't even acknowledge him. As we drove away, I felt a mix of relief and disbelief. It was a harsh reminder that not every charming guy has good intentions. I decided to take a break from dating altogether and focus on myself for a while. A couple of months ago, I decided to go out for a girls' night with some friends. We hit up a club downtown and had a blast dancing the night away. That's when I met a guy named Chris. He was attractive and confident, and I was immediately drawn to him. After a few drinks, we ended up back at his place, and things got hot and heavy pretty quickly. After a while, we ended up in bed. The initial chemistry was incredible, but as the night went on, Chris started revealing a darker side. He began bragging about his past, how he had gotten into fights, and how he could handle himself in any situation. At first, I laughed it off, but the more he talked, the more uneasy I felt. You wouldn't believe how many guys I've taken down, he said with a grin. It's like a game for me. I forced a smile, trying to remain calm. That's cool, I guess. But then he leaned in closer, and I could see a glimmer of something dangerous in his eyes. You know, I could show you how to defend yourself. You just have to trust me. Alarm bells went off in my head. I'm okay, really. I don't need any lessons. He didn't take it well. Why not? You seem like you could use some help. I started to feel trapped. I just think it's late, and I should probably head home, I said, trying to lighten the mood. Chris's expression shifted. You're not going anywhere, not yet. My heart raced as he grabbed my wrist, holding me in place. Let's just have a little fun. I yanked my arm away, adrenaline pumping. No, seriously, I need to go. He suddenly became aggressive. You're just scared. I won't hurt you, I promise. I felt panic wash over me. I rushed to grab my clothes and bolted for the door, pushing past him as he shouted after me. You'll regret this. Once outside, I ran to my car, trembling. I could hear him yelling from the apartment, but I didn't look back. I drove away, shaken to my core, knowing that I had dodged a bullet. From that day on, I promised myself to trust my instincts and be more careful about who I let into my life.